Welcome into the roundtable. I'm Brad Wakai. That is my co-host Tyson Gentry. We are back with our second edition of the NFL Draft Dive. Teams 5 through 8 today. Very interesting stuff to discuss, Tyson, about where we think they're going to go with these picks. There's some rumors that maybe quarterback, of course, because it's NFL draft season, could be taken by these teams. So we're going to dive into that. But I mean, you were saying before we got on, you're excited to kind of get past the quarterback this, quarterback that, because that's really just taking the oxygen out of all these positions, all these players, when really that may not even be the strength of this draft.
No, it's definitely not. But like this is the fun part, and unfortunately for us, in 3 weeks' time, this doesn't mean anything. What we're talking about right now, because the draft picks have traded hands, and now all of a sudden the guys 1 through 8 that we'll have broken down, and by that point we'll be through 20 or whatever. But it's going to look so much different. I mean, we got the Rodgers news coming shortly. It seems that he's going to be a Jet. I understand that it's not official yet, but Jets are minus 1,000 now for Aaron Rodgers' next team. So it's basically sounding like retirement or the New York Jets for him. How that shakes up the NFL, what the hell is going on with Lamar Jackson, all those kind of things. So we're getting into the nitty gritty here, man. There is smoke everywhere, dude. It's hard to see.
Oh, that's a fact. And Aaron Rodgers actually just bought a house or a complex or something in the Upper West Side of Manhattan. So maybe I'll run into that old crusty guy.
Well, you guys hang out at the same darkness retreats, and you're a big ayahuasca
guy. Oh, yeah. Maybe I can play darts with them, dude.
Yeah, I have a feeling Aaron Rodgers is probably pretty good darts.
I feel like he's a big darts guy,
I feel like he's the guy in the bar by himself in the corner that just kind of shows up by himself and then doesn't talk to anybody for a couple of hours. He'll run your pockets for a little while at pool and he takes off.
Yeah, has like a picture to himself and just sits there and throws darts.
He's just talking to your girl the whole time. He doesn't even pay attention to you. That's who Aaron Rodgers is.
Oh, man. So could be a New York Jet when that breaks. Tyson and I will have an in-depth breakdown on that. But right now we have to discuss the Seattle Seahawks. They're first on the clock, the fifth team selecting in the NFL draft this season, $24.4 million in cap space. That was the eighth most available, but hold on a second. They signed Geno Smith. They got a deal done with him. So he's officially going to be their quarterback next season. A big contract, $52 million front-loaded in the first year. So basically, it's an expensive stopgap. If it works out, they're going to continue to employ him for the next couple on the contract. But really, if you look at it in totality, it's another prove-it deal, 1 year loaded up front. We'll kind of figure it out from there. So interesting stuff there for Pete Carroll and the Seattle Seahawks. Besides the fifth pick, they also have the 20th, the 37th, and the 52nd. A team needs, this is what I wrote down, Tyson. I know you probably have a couple opinions too, but I think center, offensive guard are their main issues. Safety and linebacker on that defensive side for Pete Carroll's defense. And some notable free agents, Rashad Penny, who can never stay healthy at running back. Their defensive tackle, Poona Ford, is a notable free agent. And one of their starting guards, Phil Haynes, is also a free agent on the market right now. So let's dive into them, Tyson. Where do you want to attack the Seahawks?
Well, as far as Seattle goes, I think there's really two routes. If they're not trading the pick and there's no smoke that they will, you never know what's going to happen. But to me, the Geno Smith contract sure looks like we hope Anthony Richardson's there at 5. That's to me, if you're going to front load $52 million and the rest of Geno's contract money essentially over the next couple of years comes in incentives, it's going to be real hard for him to meet the incentives from the bench. I think this is let's take a guy, see if we can have Geno mentor him. We saw the physical tools Anthony Richardson possesses, all that stuff. And the only other option to me, Brad, and I'm surprised people aren't really throwing this out there a little bit more, and I anticipate this to pick up some steam. But Pete's never had a problem taking a guy with a character concern, and Jalen Carter's too good. And I just think that if he's on the board at 5, and let's say if it's between Richardson and Carter, then maybe they go quarterback. But you're not going to get interior offensive linemen this high. At least it'd be a mistake if you did in this draft class. It'll sound stupid in 10 years because one of these guys will probably make the Hall. But to me, it's Jalen Carter or Anthony Richardson is who I'm looking at. I just can't see a world in which they let the most talented or the most dominant player in this draft class slip past them at 5. Like, this is a team that's never had a problem taking a Bruce Irvin. They never had a problem trading for a Marshawn Lynch. Guys like this that have never never to the level of what Jalen Carter was in trouble for a little while. At least he was exonerated pretty quick, but the backlash is going to be crazy. And I think Seattle is kind of uniquely equipped to be like, hey, dude, we're good at this.
Yeah, and I think you pointed out, Jalen Carter, I think, is someone that Pete Carroll would love to take here at that pick. But what does the organization want to do? Because that's the big question here. Because if Anthony Richardson is as good as he looked in the combine, now his tape says otherwise, but he looks like a freak, man. Like, he looks like an absolute freak. And you already have this Geno Smith contract. Geno just came out and said he's willing to mentor a younger quarterback. So that's a little something there that could be smoke. Maybe they want to trade back. Geno says that. We have no clue what's going on. Maybe that was, hey, Geno, sign this, and you're going to say this immediately. And it's just a bunch of just smoke screens everywhere. But I think there's two options for the Seahawks that you laid out. I'm in complete agreement. They draft a young quarterback high to say, hey, we're gonna draft a guy that we can mold. That's our option here, and then we'll use the rest of the assets that we have in the early round picks to address the other needs. Or we just go, hey, let's get potentially the best player in this draft, Jalen Carter, become another game wrecker on the defensive front, and then we'll address quarterback at a later date, maybe with their later picks that they do have. They do have another first-round pick. So we're not quite sure yet, because remember, Seattle got this pick from the Denver Broncos in the Russell Wilson trade. So this would have been Denver's pick here. So this is a great spot that the Seahawks find themselves in with 2 first-round picks in this year's draft. Here's another one I want to throw out, Tyson. Now, I think this is a long shot, but they do need offensive line help. Peter Skoronski, Northwestern's offensive tackle, I think it's probably too high here at 5. We've seen crazier things happen when it comes to the offensive line prospects, but that's an area of concern that they could address now if they say, hey, we just need to address the biggest issue that we have. Let's say Carter's off the board or Will Anderson isn't there. Why don't we just shore up our offensive line?
And they were pretty lucky, and you could say luck, I guess, but it's probably more they did the work last year to end up with Tariq Woolen, to end up with Kenny Walker, to end up with all these rookies that kind of took off out of nowhere to become premier players at their positions in the NFL. So it's not a luxury pick. Don't get it confused. This isn't like the Kansas City Chiefs are picking at 5 or anything like that, but it's a spot where they can kind of swing if they want to. And I just have a really hard time seeing, either them. And the most likely scenario at the moment is that Anthony Richardson or CJ Stroud or whoever is on the board at 5, and somebody calls the Raiders call the Seahawks and be like, hey, do you want to move down to 7? We'll give you an extra second this year to 3rd next year. That will be the play. That's what John Snyder will do. That's what Pete Carroll will want to do. But the value of hitting on quarterback is so much higher, and nobody wants to admit that Geno Smith was just fine for the last 8 weeks of last year. We had a really, really great run, and then he was just a little bit better than advertised for the last couple of weeks than who we thought Geno Smith was. He's not a $52 million a year quarterback. So to me, you have DK Metcalf on the roster. You're kind of running out of time with Tyler Lockett, and that's kind of at 20. I can start talking myself into something else, but this team needs so much that I can see this pick be moved at any direction, really, which is not unique to the Seahawks, but they are certainly the best team picking within this top 5.
And so let's move to another similar situation, the Detroit Lions picking at 6, because this is a pick from the Rams that they got from the Jared Goff trade, or the Matt Stafford trade.
Rare win-win.
Rare win-win. I agree. Jared Goff played really well for the Lions last year. It seems like all those haters that were calling me an idiot for thinking Jared Goff's pretty good were pretty quiet last year, so appreciate that, everybody. Right now, $22.1 million in cap space. That's the 10th most available. Right now, Jared Goff's their quarterback. The other draft picks they do have, besides this one, they also have the 18th, their own first-round pick in this year's draft, the 48th, the 59th, and the 81st, all in the first 3 rounds. So big-time draft capital for the Detroit Lions who are looking to make a playoff push. This is what I have for their team needs. I think they really need an edge rusher to go alongside Aiden Hutchinson, and maybe that's just me being like, let's get 2 bookends and just game rack, because that defense was not good last year. I think that's what held them back a lot. And I also think they need to an improvement at linebacker and cornerback. That would be a big help. Notable free agents, Jamal Williams. They didn't the running back last year had the most touchdowns in the NFL on the ground. They didn't franchise tag him, which I was pretty shocked about. Wide receiver DJ Chark and linebacker Alex Anzalone, getting a little bit older, are also some notable free agents from last year's team. Lions, Tyson, very interesting team going into this season. They're actually the favorite in some offshore markets to win the division. So how do the Detroit Lions attack this draft?
I mean, shut the book. They're taking Devon Witherspoon.
Oof.
I think Dan Campbell's going to fall in love with the tape. I think he's going to fall in love with the person, and I don't think you risk moving back in this draft with Philly lurking at 10. I think that's a pretty realistic landing spot for him. Corners always go higher than people mock them for the first 3 months of mock draft season, and then as this draft gets closer, we see them slide up these mock draft boards because people are getting more intel. Derek Stingley wasn't a top 10 pick. Sauce Gardner was barely top 10 pick last year until the draft happened, and then they go 3-4 or whatever it was. It's a premium position, like it or not, in the NFL today. You need to be able to basically, if you can lock down one side of the football field, you're in really good shape. And they're going into the division now with an unknown with Jordan Love. He looked good in the quarter and a half or whatever it was he played against Philadelphia last year, but we don't know. The Vikings seem to be like everybody wants out of there right now. The Bears are the Bears. They're not going to be ready to compete for a minute, if at all, with the way this thing's kind of working out. But to me, I just think he's going to fall in love with the dog, man. I think Witherspoon is that guy. And I don't think you risk kind of playing with it. Everyone wants to float quarterback, and I understand that. But if you wanted to float quarterback, maybe they'd be talking to Lamar Jackson, because they're closer to being ready now than they would be if they took somebody, let him sit, and then got everybody on the roster another year older, not quite to the level that they want to be at. You got to fix the defense, man, and starts at corner.
Yeah, I like that actually. Devin Witherspoon, I think that'd be a great pick for him. And to go or to match up across from Jeff Okudah, who coming off injury really started to play into his own last year, come into his own finally, and be that top pick that they did take. I think at 4 or something like that.
I think 3.
3, yeah. And he started playing much better last year. It was just, well, the other side of the field sucks, so let's just throw it over there. So if they get a shutdown guy, because by all accounts, man, Witherspoon is that guy, like the Sauce Gardner of this year's class, who can just erase a field. That's a start for that defense, because then it allows your pass rushers to get home a little bit more with Hutchinson. And if they do address that in the later stage here, again, they have another first-round pick at 18 that we can go into more depth later in our draft dives. But I think right here, I love that, man. I think you're talking me into that. Witherspoon,
it's a Dan Campbell guy, man. I mean, like the way this guy operates, and we've seen minimal interviews. We don't know these people, but from the way that he seems to carry himself, like that's a guy that wants to bite a kneecap or two.
And let's not forget, played college ball at Illinois. He's used to playing in the cold in Big Ten country. And I know the Lions play in a dome. So do the Vikings, I guess. But you're going to have to play 4 games in 2 games in Lambeau. No, 1 in Lambeau, 1 in Soldier Field. And then whoever else is outside in the NFC when it gets cold. So I like that pick, man. It's not like he can't play on nice surfaces either.
Well, I mean, you throw him in a dome, everybody shows up to Detroit thinking they're going to put up 40 on somebody. We can't keep having 350-yard pass performances against these Detroit Lions, because it's fun to talk about them as a sleeper team for next year, but you got to play defense.
Would you be shocked if the Lions take a quarterback?
I wouldn't be shocked. I think I would be more shocked if they go with like at 6, I just feel like Tyree Wilson or somebody like that is a little bit too much of a project to kind of walk in right away, because they clearly wanted Aiden Hutchinson more than they wanted Trayvon Walker a year ago. I don't think they're interested in waiting around for somebody to find their footing and kind of develop. I think they want to win. And in all honesty, it might not be the best move for the longevity of the franchise, but if I'm a Detroit Lions fan, man, damn it, I want to win too. This has been brutal. I got teased a year ago. Like, as the game started, we thought maybe we'd make the playoffs, and then as soon as kick happened, it was like, well, I got to ruin somebody's season. I'm sick of ruining people's seasons. I want to win the division. I want to win 11 games, and I want to have a home playoff game, and those are things that happen when you get game changers at 6.
And they do have that cap space they can play around with too, the $22.1 million. So if there are players in the draft, veteran guy or in the free agency, veteran guys, that can be used to go get those type of guys to add that. You don't always have to add through the draft as well. So I'm interested to see what the Lions do. I think we're Team Witherspoon for the Lions here. Should we start a campaign?
Oh, I think that we just might have to go place a bet is all.
Okay, perfect. Now, this is an interesting one here at 7, the Las Vegas Raiders, because clearly they need a quarterback after cutting Derek Carr. Due to that, they have $48.4 million in cap space. That's the third most available in the league. Now, this is Josh McDaniel's second season there. 6-11 season last year was very, very underwhelming considering they were a playoff team the year before. Got Devontae Adams in free agency through a trade. They don't have, because of those trades, they don't have a lot of assets. They have this pick at the 38th and the 70th. So those, I always look at the top three. I think those are your biggest assets in any draft. 4 through 7, whatever. I think the first 3 round picks is what you should look at to analyze how can we get the game changers now. I have team needs as offensive line, edge, defensive backs, and linebacker. Obviously, the quarterback is the biggest need, but that's something that we'll be discussing. And notable free agents, cornerback Rock Yassin, linebacker Denzel Perryman, and their edge or defensive lineman Cleveland Farrell, who is extremely underwhelming. They did tag running back Josh Jacobs. So do the Raiders trade up? I think that's what everybody wants to know. Do you think they make an aggressive move to get one of these young quarterbacks?
If they go up at all, I have to imagine they're looking at 3 with the Cardinals. It's a heavy price to pay to go to 1, knowing that as long as you have the same grade on your board, and we don't really know how Josh McDaniels has his grades. And to be honest, I don't know if I'm in the building, if I'm trusting those grades, because every time he's been the head guy before, and even in New England, it wasn't like they were hitting home runs, especially early at the top of drafts. This is not a very good drafting pedigree here. I think if Anthony Richardson goes here, he's ruined. I think if Will Levis goes here, he's ruined. To me, franchise tag a running back without your quarterback a year after not picking up your running back's 5th-year option is abysmal. It's horrible. It shouldn't be condoned. And to be honest with you, that's why I thought Josh McDaniels should have lost his job by Christmas last year. They're going to run it back. But in the free agent market, I think Jimmy Garoppolo makes the most sense, just with the history there and with the fact that he's a veteran guy that can come in and try to win. So we have to pay attention to that, because that's going to change the direction they want to go in the draft as well. But it's got to be, you have to get a difference maker in Vegas. And that defensive side of the ball is so bad that it doesn't really matter if they go up and they get Anthony Richardson, because it's still going to be a 7-win football team. Like if he's good, they're an 8-win team. And if he's bad, they win 3 games. It's not going to save the franchise. You have to get somebody that you can lock down, hopefully for a decade, which doesn't happen in Vegas or Oakland, either one. Like, these guys come and then they get pissed and they want to leave, and then they will fire the head coach and the general manager, and then they'll replace them with bums, and those bums will do the same thing, and then we'll have the same discussion year over year, because that's who this organization is.
I thought Josh McDaniels probably was going to get – well, I thought he should have been fired after losing to fucking Jeff Saturday. That was ridiculous.
That's horrible.
And, he kept his job. They're running it back. And, and I always say this, in fairness to the Raiders, that you got to have some stability at head coach. And so I can understand keeping McDaniels and just seeing, okay, let's give him at least another year here, and then we'll see. Because that's already a clown show franchise. I don't care if they're in Oakland. I don't care if they're in Las Vegas. It's still the Raiders' DNA at the end of the day.
It's Mark Davis, man. It's all the way through, man. Talk about DNA.
Man, oh, man. I think they get Jimmy Garoppolo as quarterback. So I think the quarterback drafting for this year by Vegas, I think that's null. I think they either stay here at 7, or I would not be shocked if they trade back, because, like I said, their assets are bad. They need to replenish these things from their Devontae Adams trade. They have so many holes in this roster, and I think it was apparent last season. Like, we saw them make the playoffs 2 years ago. We're like, oh, man, they just plug in Devontae Adams. They're right there. They're going to be better. It's like, no, this team is just not very good. So I think they trade back here. There's going to be some suitable teams who I think are going to find their guy that they're in love with. And if somebody falls out of this because the quarterbacks are going to go so high, I would not be shocked if there's teams chomping at the bit to move up and just, trade some of their assets, go up and get their guy who they think can plug and play immediately. So I would be shocked if Garoppolo's not on the Raiders next season. That's my personal opinion.
It makes way too much sense to happen. Like, it should happen. Everyone in the world thinks like this is a good marriage. Jimmy wants to play. Jimmy wants to start. He knows the system. He knows the guys, all that stuff. they don't normally do things that make sense. It didn't make
No,
sense
true.
to us when they went out and got Devontae Adams. Everybody else in the country wanted to talk about how this was the missing piece, and we bought the hype for a second. But I think you and I still both had them third in the division, or actually last, because we were a little bit higher on the Broncos than we should have been. It wasn't going to be a playoff team no matter what. So now to look at the roster and say, well, imagine if one of these quarterbacks hit, then what? Then you have Devontae Adams on the books for $30 million in his age 36 season or whatever. Hunter Renfrow, who is lightning in a bottle, and we like on this show, but he's a safety blanket, right? And you could pay Tyler Boyd a lot less money. You could pay Hunter Renfrow for 85% of the production from a healthy Renfrow, but they're screwed, dude. And so they're benefiting from the fact that there are quarterbacks that are going to go high that'll push the other kind of top tier prospects back and down the board a little bit. But you sure have to hope that the other organizations are looking at this, expecting you to make the right decision. And I think that's a conversation NFL teams are having is, well, the Raiders are just going to fuck it up.
Right. They always do. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see what they do. It's pretty quiet surrounding any news coming out of Las Vegas.
That's why I think they like Levis.
I wouldn't be. Well, I guess I said I'd be shocked if Garoppolo's not on here. I wouldn't be surprised, me personally, if they signed Garoppolo and then also drafted Levis at 7. Does that not scream Raiders to you?
And then they take Tanner McKee at 39 or whatever.
Just pull a full like Howie, like, oh, it worked for the Eagles. Let's just draft 6 quarterbacks now.
Hopefully, if you're a Raiders fan, you were alive through the 70s.
Man, yeah, it's been and we went from we went from talking about the Lions now talking about the Raiders. It's been tough for both those teams. We want them to get better.
I mean, one of them's on the right direction.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, last team in this draft dive, the Atlanta Falcons, another interesting team to discuss here. Many people projected them to be having the number 1 pick, having the worst record. That was their win total from Vegas. And they completely exceeded expectations, finishing 7-10 in Arthur Smith's second season as head coach. This offseason, they have $66.7 million in cap space. That is the second most available from any team in the league. Now, they had Marcus Mariota as quarterback last season. That ended poorly. I think, honestly, if I'm Marcus Mariota, I don't blame him. Desmond Ridder stinks. So I have a question mark at quarterback. I have no clue what the Falcons are thinking going into next season, who they want to run their offense. Besides the 8th pick, they also have the 45th and the 76th pick, so not a lot of high assets. Team needs QB, D-line, linebacker, and cornerback. Yes, their defense is atrocious. Notable free agents, offensive tackle Caleb McGarry. That's a big one. Edge Lorenzo Carter and linebacker Rashawn Evans. So Falcons have a ton of needs, clearly. They overexceeded expectations. Like I said, this team is not a 7-win team. I don't know how they did it, to be completely honest with you, Tyson. So if you're Arthur Smith and the general manager, you're in your 3rd season. You kind of got to start getting this thing on the right track here. Where do you attack and how do you attack this pick?
I think this is kind of where we start to get in the Skoronski range or Broderick Jones or whatever tackle that you like best. But to be honest with you, Brad, and this is totally off the wall, but you asked me if I'm Arthur Smith, and what I think Arthur Smith is thinking is I want to trade back into the early teens, and I want to take Bijan Robinson, and I want to add some picks. And it doesn't make any sense, right? It's a horrible, horrible pick. They want to run the ball. Yeah. They really do. They want to run the ball. Tyler Algier is just a guy. He played really well last season, but there's going to be a shelf life on Tyler Algier. This is an offense that has the weapons, and everybody in the world wants a quarterback there. And they came out, their own Twitter account, the Atlanta Falcons, retweeted the tweet that said, "We don't want Lamar Jackson." Makes no sense to me. I think this is like the premier landing spot for a quarterback with Kyle Pitts and Drake London. And before you hop on the Kyle Pitts was bad last season, I just want to point out Mariota threw 60% of the passes to him that were uncatchable. So that makes it a little bit hard to play well. Drake London came on, played really well. We'll see what happens with AJ Terrell, right? Because he's going to have to get paid. And do they want to pay him? And is that a draft day deal that is going to go down? Are they looking at Christian Gonzalez and they want to move AJ Terrell to somebody and maybe pick up some extra capital later in the first round and on the second day, because this is a team in a horrible division that on paper looks really bad, but in reality is a lot closer to winning this division than I think people are willing to admit.
And AJ Terrell played good last year. Like, he was a really good cornerback. So he has value on the market for teams that want him. So that's an interesting piece that I didn't think about. I think you're right about the premier landing spot for a QB. Like, they have good young talent at skill position. Drake London is going to be good if he can stay healthy. And that's the big if. That's what we discussed when Drake London came out of college last year, was the health concerns. But when he plays, he's going to be productive. And if somebody can just unlock Kyle Pitts, that dude is a beast. Like, he is Travis Kelce. They just haven't found a way for him to get involved like Travis Kelce has in Kansas City. So you have good options there. The problem is this defense, since Dan Quinn has left, has been horrendous. And it was pretty bad, on the way out too. And it's just gotten worse without his defensive mind calling up plays and making everybody on his defense better. So it's been rough for Atlanta. I think here's the thing. I don't know what they're going to do at quarterback, because at 8, they're going to be out of the range for any of the top 4 guys, theoretically. You'd imagine. So you're stuck with Desmond Ridder, question mark. Like, you're not in the sweepstakes for Aaron Rodgers. You just admitted that you're out on Lamar Jackson. Maybe that's a smoke screen, Tyson. Who knows? So
smoke screen or collusion
or something. So I don't think they can go into this season with Desmond Ridder. I think if Arthur Smith does that, he's crazy, because he legitimately might get fired in a year or two if he does that. Like, it's just bad organizational decisions, and you'd be surprised if that was the route they went. So at this pick, I don't know, man. It's hard. I think you're right.
Off the wall.
Yeah, please.
Off the wall here, and I haven't seen it floated anywhere. This is just kind of off the top of my head. But if things are as bad in Minnesota as people are saying they are, and you can go back you can trade 8 for 15, a second, and a third next year, don't you think you call Minnesota and you say, what's it take to get Kirk?
True.
How much Kirk Cousins cost? Because it doesn't make much sense right now for Minnesota. But if Harrison Smith's house on the market, Adam Thielen wants out, Zarius Smith wants out, you have a trade offer on the table for Dalvin Cook, Alexander Madison's going somewhere else, and then you're kind of looking around and it's like you have Justin Jefferson and that's it. And it'd be super shitty to watch them waste Justin Jefferson, but you got to get out from underneath that thing at some point. And there's not that many teams that have the cap space and the need in a division that is so bad that Kirk Cousins makes them a division champion next year. And no, it's no disrespect to Mr. Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints. But I think that's a realistic thing that I might get a lot of hate for saying right now. But call me after the draft.
Yeah, Kirk Cousins would be a good fit. I think he likes throwing to tight ends. He likes throwing to big receivers. He's proven that in the past, and he's got both of them in Atlanta. What do you think about them maybe calling up San Francisco for Trey Lance? Would that ever be a possibility? It seems far-fetched because he's unproven.
They have to figure their shit out first. Like, San Fran has to figure out if they want this guy to play. Because they don't even know what they have. So they run the risk of – they both run the risk, right? The Falcons could be fleeced because he could be nothing because we haven't seen anything. But the reality of the situation is the Niners traded so much for this kid to not even be able to get a look at him. And then you have Brock Purdy, who just is going into surgery like this Saturday or something like that. He might not be ready. So maybe if they bring back Jimmy Garoppolo, that could be a situation that I could see play out. I think Arthur Smith would love him. I just worry that going and getting somebody that we don't know if he can throw the football, how that looks after you spend 5 on a tight end or 4 on a tight end and then 8 on a wide receiver the next year. At some point, you have to get somebody to throw these dudes the football because it's malpractice to just keep taking these skill position players with no real conductor, right? It's a Ferrari engine, but you got no driver.
Yeah, 100%. And at some point, whether it's through their freaking free agency with all that cap space, they have to address the defensive side of the ball. Like, enough of being a sieve. People just have like career days against this team. It's ridiculous. So they have to address that if they ever want to compete in the division. I mean, and it's nice that Brady's gone. It's nice that the Saints have a little stopgap with Carr, and they keep kicking it down the can down the hallway with that payment that's going to come due. But I think you're a little bit nervous with Carolina in
You
the
have to be
division with
terrified
Frank Reich there.
with that entire coaching staff. I mean, that whole coaching staff is stacked up. There's DJ Moore's a really good player that's
You
finally going
love
to
him.
get somebody throwing the ball. Man, I'm so excited. But we'll talk about Carolina as we go through 9 through 12 next week. But if I'm in the NFC South, I'm absolutely terrified of what the Carolina Panthers could turn into, and it might not be quick, but you have to be planning for it if you're also in the division, because look at what happens with these other teams. Look at what happened to the Raiders and the Broncos once Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert started showing up. They freaked the fuck out, and they had to swing for the fences and try to hit home runs, and both of them ended up striking out. But that's because they're playing reactionary. If you can stay on the same level, or at least maybe be a step behind, right? But it's really hard to stay ahead in the NFL, but you can't get lapped within your own division, and you run that risk.
100%. I completely agree with that. Okay, so that's our draft dive for the teams 5 through 8. Like Tyson said, the Carolina Panthers picking at 9 will be next up on the clock for us next week as we go through teams 9 through 12 in the upcoming NFL draft. If Aaron Rodgers picks a team, if Lamar Jackson gets an offer, we will cover it next week. We have a ton of basketball to watch this week. And oh, by the way, we will break down the official bracket for you guys next week, going through our picks, telling you who we like. We'll have betting lines. I'm going to print this whole thing out. I'll have everything written down. We're going to be ready to rock, ready to roll as we get ready for March Madness. So that's going to be coming up next week. We got a huge thing coming for you. But in the meantime, we're not doing a basketball podcast before the championship games this weekend, Tyson, mainly because we don't know who's playing them, so we can't really give out picks. So where can they find those if they're interested in tailing or fading us?
Well, they will be in the Chalkboard app. It is on the App Store. It's on Google Play, whatever app store you use for your phone. The app is called Chalkboard. The group name is the Roundtable. And like Brad said, we're throwing picks in there every day. We're currently sweating a PGA Championship ticket because Rory McIlroy decided he didn't want to show up for a little while today, which kind of hurt. But we have that in there. We have all the college stuff. We have some NHL stuff in there. We have MMA stuff. Whatever you imagine to bet on. Brad put it down a parlay on F1 racing and ping pong the other day. I saw. So it was pretty cool. No, not quite. But we're man, we like to play, and we've been having some good luck. I think you probably have the most college basketball bets in the entire country right now.
It's published. It's too many.
Published in that thing, but you know what? We're making money. They're all above 500. Brad's got soccer in there all the time. It's just really fun. So if you hop in the Chalkboard app, group name is the Roundtable. Listen to us or don't, man. Just engage.
Absolutely, and you can share your own picks in there as well. It's a community. That's what we're trying to build. And in the meantime, if you miss us over the weekend, we understand. We get that a lot. You can follow us on our social medias. Instagram @_the Roundtable pod _ our TikTok handle is the same, or send us a tweet over at TRT_pod. Back next week with a ton of content for you guys. Enjoy your weekend. We will speak to you all soon. Peace.